camera like that.
You can try
That's
to
like
get
12 years ago.
you didn't have to attend or something.
Yeah, so
Are we good to
Now you're
go?
out.
I'm straight. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and call this to order. This is the Public Safety Committee meeting for the city of Hendersonville dated December 13th, 2022. Let's go around the room because there's some that are out of view of the camera. We'll start on my left.
Rachel Collins, Ward 5.
Jim Jones, HPD.
Karen Dixon, Ward 4.
Mayor Jamie Clary. Andy Gilley, Parks Director.
Jesse Ecknoff, Chief of Operations.
Terry Goodwin, Ward 4.
Scotty Bush, Hendersonville Fire.
Russ Edwards, Alderman for Ward 3. Do we have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Motion from Alderman Collins, second from Alderman Goodwin. All in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Okay, moving on to the minutes. Here's the odd situation. The October 11th meeting, I was the only one here out of the Public Safety Committee. I'm satisfied that the minutes accurately reflect what happened during the meeting. So if y'all are satisfied, I'm going to make a motion to approve the October 11th Public Safety Committee meeting minutes. If anybody wants to second it.
I'll second it.
Second from Alderman Collins. Alderman Edwards made the motion. All in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Do we have a motion to approve of the December 1st Public Safety Committee meeting minutes? We were all present at that meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
Okay, motion from Alderman Goodwin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Alderman Collins. All in favor? Aye, that's unanimous. Okay, we have a reading of resolution 2022-48, a resolution to accept a donation from a city resident for public safety and parks. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Alderman Collins makes the motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
Second from Alderman Goodwin. Do we have any discussion?
I would just say how much this is appreciated by whomever made the donation.
I need to enlighten y'all about a little change. Now good time.
Sure, go ahead.
So last week he got a phone call from a person representing his family that he wanted to donate $25,000 to the city for public safety and for parks. If somebody just gives the city a gift, I can accept that. But once he says for, then there's liability attached to that. So I can't accept liabilities. I have to go to the board to accept those liabilities. He wants to make sure, and he explained this to me then, is that he wants to do this before the end of the year. We have one meeting to appropriate money. It takes us 2 meetings. So we had a resolution that just directs Jesse to write up to include this in the mid-year. So, and I think that's satisfying for everything. And as far as taking the donation with those strings attached, and I think it's a wonderful donation. I think it's a wonderful gesture from his family. And he said that they want to do that repeatedly for the next couple of years. So I want to do everything we can to show our gratitude and get this done quickly. So that's why we're here. Over the weekend, there was a fundraiser for 2 of our police officers, and in the Assistant Police Academy Alumni Association, some of our officers, some other volunteers raised approximately $5,500 for these 2 police officers. I realize there's probably not a better use for the public safety portion of that donation than for these police officers. And so I talked to the gentleman about the donation and he agreed. So what he's going to do, and what he agreed then, and he has done, is he wrote 2 checks. He wrote one to the Citizen Police Academy Alumni Association to support those officers. He wrote a second check that we'll use for parks. So what I'll be asking tonight when we take this up tonight is that we eliminate that for public safety part of that, just for parks. He also, each of those checks were $25,000.
Wow. Okay.
So it wasn't a total, it was a total of 50,000. Yeah, I completely agree. He has asked not to be identified, and I haven't done that. I think maybe I told Jesse his name. I don't even think I told you. Very grateful for this.
Do you need a motion to remove the public safety portion
I
here
will.
in this committee?
Not necessarily. I will when we get in there, but it's up to y'all how y'all handle it.
And then moving forward, if that's how we would anticipate, it probably needs to be or rather than and.
Yeah.
if that's the kind of flexibility.
Probably so. So he's gonna get back to us in October of next year and let us know sort of where he is on things. He just needs a letter from us, and we've already taken care of this, that he is not benefiting from this contribution at all. He's got this.
Anything specific in the parks to spend this on, or just put it in the?
He hasn't expressed that yet. What we'll probably do is come up with a couple items and then go back.
Any further discussion? All in favor of this resolution? Say aye. Aye, so that's unanimous. Okay, next item is discussion regarding the fleet replacement policy. Who wants to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. We had a discussion previously about the fire replacement policy for, those large one-time purchases where it might be every second year, every third year, where we're gonna spend $1 million or 800,000. But we also wanted to include PE into it, because they go through the most amount of vehicles. So Chief Jones has made a schedule. I'll hand the fire replacement schedule out. I think you guys have previously seen this. Thank you. So this one is pretty straightforward for fire fleet replacement. It just talks about replacement year, the year that we have to order the replacement. The order of the replacement is going to be dependent upon the lead times for some of these vehicles. I think Chief Bush recently got some good news on lead times. Is that correct, Chief Bush?
Yeah, so if we take one to mid-year review, I know the previous discussion was 3 years. They're currently holding a spot for us. If we decide, or y'all decide as a board to purchase it, we'll have it in our possession by October or November of 2024. So it won't take the full 3 years to get it. And that's based off the engines that we design as a committee, or the committee designs. They have 3 different bays: bay 1, bay 2, bay 3. Bay 1 is 500 or less options, so we don't do a lot of thrills on ours. If you go over 500 or 500 to 750, then it stays in that second bay. So they're able to give us, because we just built 7, they're able to take a year off using the same drawings and everything that we just did for engine 7. So it reduces it by 12 months.
So on the fire fleet replacement, we just kind of basically laid out 3 scenarios. So the top table is a 12-year schedule scenario. The middle table is a 15-year schedule scenario, and the bottom table is a 20-year schedule scenario. The Fire Association has a recommendation for the 15-year schedule. It's nothing that's set in stone, but it is the recommendation on a 15-year schedule. So that's provided right there in the middle for you guys.
It's 15 years for a front line, and then 5 years as a reserve status. So it would be a primary engine company or truck company for 15 years. And then those last 5, we would roll it into our reserve status and get 5 more years of service out of it.
And I mean, there is some flexibility too with, sometimes some of the vehicles may experience issues where we want to replace sooner. Sometimes if they're in good working order, we can extend the life of those vehicles. I think there's 2 service inspections that we do annually on the fire equipment. And some of the guidelines with Fire Association that, like in your backup, they can stretch to 25 years if they get annual inspections and they're deemed to be in good working order. So this, the fleet replacement schedule is not only just to get us on a more consistent basis with replacing, but it's really per budget. So if we want to set a fund aside that says, hey, we have a fund for vehicle replacement, we can be consistent with the money that we're putting in every year to avoid, 1 year it's $1 million or 2 million, and the next year it's nothing, and the next year it's 2 million. Then we have to come back and say like, hey, this wasn't in the budget last year, but it's going to be $2 million this year. So this will kind of help just keep our budget more consistent. And that doesn't mean we have to absolutely, if a truck's in good condition, we have to absolutely stick to the schedule. There can be some flexibility in it, but from a budgeting perspective, it's also very helpful. So it kind of achieves two purposes by having a schedule put together.
And I have a question on that. Because when I met with Chief Bush, it depends on which truck you go with too, and the length of it. Will that change this?
So this assumes the more expensive custom build truck. And I think probably the biggest benefit, Chief Bush can speak more to this, besides the safety of the guy. The benefit for a lot of the residents is that those trucks on a custom build have a much shorter turning radius. Because the back wheels are further up. So the longer the trucks go, it's a little bit harder to get around in some of the
Well,
streets, so the access is also better.
I didn't want the first one to be clear, and then just for the safety aspect of it, I feel like if you can't put them in the safest, we don't need to buy any.
Yeah,
I agree. I feel like buying substandard things can sometimes be a waste of money, but instead of a savings of money.
So the commercials, we've had them in the organization in prior years, and they last about 10 years. So really, you would be looking at buying another one every 10 years, which is gonna be equal to the purchase of one that you would get 20 years out of. And what Ms. Goodwin's talking about is, the commercial pumpers are not crash tested. So they do nothing to promote safety, whereas the commercials, or the customs, I'm sorry, are given crash tests. So there was a local agency that had a rollover with theirs, and the cab collapsed in on the personnel because it was a commercial and it wasn't crash tested. The customs are reinforced with steel and metal to prevent that from happening. That's another safety feature that is involved with custom bumpers.
I have two questions and, which might be a little premature, but I would at some point like to know what level of annual budgeting are required for each of these three. To achieve this, and I'm also kind of curious as to why we're only including engine trucks and we're not including things like I don't know what all vehicles the fire department operates, but I've seen SUVs, ATVs, pickup trucks. These are all, to me, part of assets that that add up.
yeah, so I think the discussion with your regular pickup trucks, and some of that equipment is, there's, I think, greater discretion as to what condition they're in. When you put a fleet replacement schedule together, a lot of times it'll be, hey, at 10 years or 100,000 miles. Well, if Chief knows he has one that's been idling and it doesn't have 100,000 miles, but it has a lot of idle hours on it, or it's kind of been beat up, then it's going to be scheduled for replacement a lot sooner. And since a lot of those items, while we certainly could include them, there's more discretion, and since there's smaller price tag on them, it's not going to be the impact to the budget.
And are they just regular vehicles or do they have special adaptations?
So they're just basically 4-wheel drive vehicles.
Okay.
Because fire prevention, they go to job sites, they have to get off road. As far as mine, it's just a basic Tahoe, but they're all government pricing. Same thing PD uses. It's state contract bid pricing. So it's like 2 years ago when I got the Tahoe that I got, the mayor allowed me to buy her 3 years ago. It was on state contract and it was $33,000. So at a much reduced price than what regular customers pay. And so like mine's a 19 and it's got 20-something thousand miles on it. So I mean, as long as you take care of them, you maintain them, wash them, the replacement need for those won't be as much. Now, fire prevention may be a little different because they're out in theirs 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, whereas mine's not.
But they also don't have any special.
Lights, we put lights on like PD does, aftermarket lights, things like that.
They're public safety fleet vehicles, so they have heavier alternators. The suspension's usually a little stiffer. They may put a bigger battery in them. They do make some modifications to them. And as a general rule, like Chief Bush's or some of ours, they don't come with all, they don't have sunroofs on them and they don't have
Letter T.
Yeah, it's kind of like
Yeah.
basic AM FM radio. And some of this stuff is required now. It's a safety item, like the hands-free for cell phone. I mean, used to, that was an option, so we didn't include it. But it's mandatory now on those vehicles that they have that on there. So, you know, so
Mhm.
they're pretty much a stripped down version of what you would see on a car lot.
Okay.
But they have some modifications.
That makes sense to me.
For-
Why we
I think they call
include them then.
them, yeah,
instead of
so
this.
the fleet ones, they call them SSVs, which is special service vehicles, which denotes the modifications they do to them, as opposed to like the patrol cars we buy are called PPVs, which are police pursuit vehicles, and they have a lot of different stuff on them.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
So the annual would be around $600,000 or $700,000 for fire. That's, yeah,
For 15-year plan or,
yeah, for on the 15-year plan.
okay,
So that's assuming about $1 million a year, because your ladder trucks are gonna be more expensive and your engines are gonna be less expensive. And that's with 9 vehicles. So that's with 7 engines and 2 ladders. What are the new engine ladders costing you?
1.8, 1.9 million dollars.
So you're probably.
Now, on top of that too, with the replacement program, so like next year, because it is, I mean, we've got to do our due diligence. We can write grants for AFG, Assistant Firefighter Grants, which is for equipment, and we've done that in the past. And so next year, we plan on bringing it to you folks before we do it to ask permission to apply for that grant. And we're gonna write one for a truck company. Because if you look at your list right now, we've got the 2000, that's our current reserve. Engine 6 is the one that I was wanting to replace that will come before you at mid-year. And then the next one is our 100-foot platform truck company at Station 3. So my intent is when I open up that AFG is to bring it before y'all and ask permission to apply for that, and we'll write one for a truck company, which potentially can save the city millions of dollars if we get accepted for that. I mean, we're gonna do everything we can to try to save money for the city by doing that. I mean, it's a great opportunity, and as long as that money and funding's there, we've applied every year for it.
Have you ever gotten it?
We got it in previous years, maybe as far back as 2011, maybe. If I remember correctly, I was not in administration then. So I can't really tell you the exact date, but we have applied before and been successful. The boat that we have, Marine One, was written on a grant. So, I mean, we're always pursuing opportunities to get equipment and stuff and save the city money. We'll always do that.
Yeah, so I think if you figured out at 1.8, 2 engines, and then 800,000 for 7 engines, it's about 613 a year. So if you were to say in that range, we bump that range up a little bit, you could capture some of those, the trucks and ATVs and boats and things of that nature. So you could, there's no limit to what you could put into set aside for, some of the fleet replacement. But it is a little bit hard to pinpoint because a lot of times those schedules are meant for your routine every day. I think we had a Hummer that was running well, but was quite a few years past, but we were able to keep it, salvage it, and reduce costs.
Yeah, so what we do with those and admin vehicles is we kick those down for training. So folks that travel to classes, they drive those to training classes. So like our expeditions, which are 2009s that we still have, we'll probably put them in surplus, try to sell them. You may get $4 or $5 grand for them, it just depends. If you can't get much money for them, we may use it for training. It's just whatever we decide as an organization to do with those. But we usually kick those vehicles down. We got a Tahoe right now that we're going to kick down to training from everyday activity. So we try to put those vehicles in play to save money on the top end. And almost truck companies, if we were to get a grant and receive one, if you folks are on a schedule, you just put that money aside in anticipation of spending it. If we got the grant, then obviously that money would just carry over for next year to help either fire, police, whoever with fleet replacement.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a good opportunity.
police.
Yeah, here's the police side of that house. There's one there. You see that? Actually, I think fire is probably a little more straightforward because 90s wasn't really what the specialized makes 10. With PD, there's more vehicles and they have different lifespans. for the different uses of the vehicles. There is no, unfortunately, unlike fire, for police, there's no national standard on, they don't have a recommendation. Some agencies do, what,
50,000.
50,000 miles on the vehicles, so that, to me, that's extreme, one way, and some agencies probably
Most of
go
the,
too long.
the majority try to tend to go right at that 100,000 mile mark. That's kind of the average is what we found.
So on the spreadsheet, what we have here is on the far left is administrative vehicles. So these are the ones that are, recommended at 10 years. And then if you go to the middle column, this is CID, and they're recommended at 8 years. And then on the far right, it's your patrol vehicles, those vehicles that are out every day driving around. And that replacement schedule, as it is right now, is on a 5-year, 100,000 mile recommendation.
Is that? How long does it take to get 100,000 miles on it? It's 5 years.
5 years is the average. Some of them are gonna hit it prior to that. Some, well, and usually the only ones that are less than that are the ones that we moved into the other two categories for longer replacement. That's probably, I mean, it's hard to say 100%, but that's kind of the average is when they hit that. If we get one that ages out on years, but maybe it's lower in mileage, then a lot of times what we'll do, especially if we're having low maintenance costs on it, we'll move that into the reserve status pool for officers where their cars go down and they're gonna be in the shop for several days, so they still got something to drive when they're on patrol, or for our reserve officers to come in. And that's where we've kind of been hurting too for the last few years, because we just haven't had excess vehicles. And by the time they get into the reserve status, you're talking about a vehicle that's got 160,000 miles on it. And now we're asking these guys to come in, volunteer their time and help the city out, and they're driving a really old vehicle. I mean, I can tell you tonight, the majority of officers working the Christmas for Kids event are our reserve officers who volunteer to come in and work that. So it's kind of hard to ask them to do that. And they're doing traffic control, so they've got to have a vehicle with operational lights and emergency equipment on it in order to do that traffic, especially at night like this. But just in general, if they go out on patrol, they've got to have a decent vehicle, so.
Since there hasn't been a fleet plan in the past, what would it take to get the PD current?
Well, there's 57 vehicles. If we follow this plan that like today.
That need, so
Yeah,
57
I think-
to get us,
Yeah, 57, and that's figuring if we did 10 at mid-year. So going off of this schedule, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Jones. But going off this schedule, there's 10 that are listed for 2022, 4 in this column and 6 on the first page. And those we had held off at the beginning of the year because we were in the red with our budget.
Right.
So we said, let's wait, let's do 10 at the beginning of the year, let's do 10 at mid-year.
That's great.
To make sure that we have the funding to pay for them. So assuming we do those 10, this policy would still dictate that there's 40 patrol vehicles, 10 CID vehicles, and 7 admin vehicles that are passed. This, again, this is a recommendation, but that are, and I think there were several years that there were no vehicle purchases made.
So from 2009 through 2011, we bought 0 police vehicles, and that's
So 3, that was
before you, that's correct, sir.
is that 3 years?
4,
Okay, 4 years, so
9, 10, 11, no, wait. It should have been 4 years, but it may have actually been like 3.5. Because the last Crown Vics we bought were 2008,
So I think we
and we still have some of those.
working your way out of that hole, because right now we have, if that's 20 vehicles a year and there was 3.5 report, and that's just for patrol.
And keep in mind too, that is over since 2008. Our fleet has continued to grow as the police department has grown, so that's added more vehicles into the mix, so. And it's just, that's basically what we're doing, is trying to climb out of it. I think this year with the 10 that were purchased at the beginning budget, I think that was going to get the last of our Crown Vics out of the fleet, which is a wonderful thing. Now we're starting to work to try to get the Caprices out of the fleet, because once they start getting that high mileage on them due to the type of service they do, the cost of maintenance is astronomical.
So
And
you
more stuff
need
goes-
57 basically to be current, which
I see the price for patrol. What's the price for a CID vehicle?
So it depends on, and so what we've done, Chief Bush mentioned state bid. The last few years, what we've tried to do is advertise for public bid for our police cars. As opposed to the state bid, and we've actually come out better. This year was an anomaly. Ford, Chevrolet, and Dodge are all decreasing or doing away with government and fleet incentives that they previously offered. Chevrolet is still going to offer some, but they don't offer a police PPV or sedan other than the Tahoe. That's the only thing they offer. So, and they offer pickup trucks. And so like when we purchase an ACO, the animal control officer's vehicle, well, the last couple times we've gone with Chevrolet because they gave us the absolute best price. But we look at state bid and then we try to advertise this. The CID cars are less. They're usually around 32,000, I believe, to 33,000. And that's really that's more than what we were previously paying, and that's now what we used to pay for a patrol vehicle. Now, this year for the patrol vehicle, the 10 we purchased were 38,000 and change
Plus 18.
for the equipment, yes.
Yes.
And that's considering, and so if that equipment, sometimes we can transfer equipment from an older car to a newer car. But a lot of times what happens is at the end of 5 years, light bars, radios, those things are to the point they have to be replaced.
Mhm.
The LED lights, if we get 5 years out of those LED lights before they go out, we feel very, very fortunate. The lifespan on them, the amount of time they're on is just, and of course, they're on the exterior of the vehicle. So they're exposed to the heat, sun, rain.
Mhm.
The cages, if they don't change the style of the vehicle, the prisoner transport cages can be transferred. What we ran into last time, they changed the body style, so none of the cages or brackets would fit. And same with the light bars. They can, if they change the roof area by as much as 2 inches, the light bars won't fit.
So does the 18,200, does that include if you do have to replace everything?
That's everything.
That's
the-
our,
That's the radio and, laptop.
maybe we can get it lower, but that's what we should plan
That's what
to
we
be
should plan.
conservatively high.
Because that's a watch guard in-car video camera. That's the laptop, and most people, laptops age out. I mean, in 5 years, nobody keeps a laptop that long. The radio, all the lights, the siren, the cages, gun racks.
Mhm.
So that's all the equipment that goes in.
Okay. No, go ahead.
We lease the motorcycles.
You do, okay.
We used to purchase them.
Yeah.
We found that, we looked at leasing several years ago. Prior to Mayor Clark. But it was not cost effective for vehicles. But for our motorcycles, it was very cost effective because our motor officers are swapping those motorcycles out and getting a new one every 2 years. So all we're basically doing on those motorcycles is tires, batteries, and an oil change. We're not doing major maintenance, mechanical maintenance on those for the most part.
How many do we have?
12 motorcycles.
Pretty cool.
So the total for all the vehicles on an annual basis is about $1.5 million. If you were to take the admin vehicles, the CID vehicles, and then all the patrol vehicles on their schedules, that's gonna be a little bit different year to year.
But how, does that dollar figure assume we're caught up?
No, that would just be on, like, if this is that we're gonna do year after year after year. Catching back up would
It's not financially feasible to
It
try
would
to
take-
catch up and.
Yeah, I think we just.
Start,
we would
start over here.
Huh?
Santa Claus?
Yeah, I mean, I say, our thing has been on a 10 or 20 car, on a 20 car replacement schedule, we can work with that.
The other thing too is if you catch up all at once, then they're gonna come due all at once too. So if you were to buy like 60 per day, you would have that hit in your budget.
Which I think it's 2.7 million plus that we're. Fine, so. Maybe.
And we try to manage the fleet in a way knowing that anytime you get that far behind, it's tough to get back. However, we try to manage the fleet in such a way that we'll move cars around, and we may take one and put it with somebody that's not gonna drive it as well. And once it goes into the reserve pool, that's another thing. We know the car's gonna last long, because it's not being driven every day for the most part. But we also still have to make sure those cars are dependable. Sort of like Chief Bush was talking about with a reserve fire engine, it's gotta be ready to go if you need it. So, I would never approach this, or I would not approach you as a board and say, hey, we need to catch up with 50 something cars. I mean, that's just not.
And it would mean they were all due at the same time. So.
That would create a huge problem.
Like right now, it's much better than 3, 4, or 5
Oh,
years to go. So
most definitely.
I think this schedule would get us on a
So
path
if we
forward.
could get on
It's a
this.
huge improvement from where we've been.
I would be.
And in a
If we
few
got on
years-
this schedule, I'd be
And
elated.
I'm having a little trouble seeing it. How many cars would this have us replacing a year? I know we're talking about 10 at mid-year, so would we move forward with 20 a year
So
like we did this
it
year?
would be 20 just for the patrol column. So on the far right, there's a patrol column
Sure.
spreadsheet. On CID, you do about 4.12, so it'd be 4, 4, 4, 5, 4, something like that.
Right.
And then the admin vehicles, you do a little less than a vehicle and a half a year.
Okay.
And what we've done in the past is if we ask for 20 vehicles and 2 of those need to be admin vehicles, we just cut back, we buy 18 patrol vehicles and 2 admins to the total of 20.
How
Try
many
to stay within the parameters.
So how many patrol vehicles do we need now, or like overdue, due to be replaced?
40.
Is it 40?
I think after, well, it's actually less than 40 patrol, because you included in that number patrol, CID, and admin.
You said 57.
I thought it was,
So to have
18.
replacement year, everything that's 21 and above is 40. There's
Yeah,
40 and
Yeah, so
21.
40 patrol vehicles.
At approximately 50,000 apiece with equipment.
Probably
Yeah.
56.
60,
Right at 60.
about 60,000.
and then
3818.
10 CID that are passed
Yeah,
and 7 admin.
But if we could get either 20 a year,
I mean, I think what we do
And what was that cost per year again?
for
we
all
just
of them,
covered?
about $1.5 million.
And so.
Off the math I did in this meeting.
And just to point out to y'all too, if you see one that's a dark gray. Lined in there, that's a seized vehicle, so we have to handle them completely different. You won't see those in a patrol column, you'll just see those in admin or. CID SSB vehicle.
And then we would probably budget for PD a little differently because PD is going to buy a pretty consistent year on year. Where we probably, when if we had a good year, we probably want to put money to do a special reserve fund. Because they're going to be consistent year over year with what they purchase. Where fire is going to go a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years between. Depending on when they bought their vehicle, so the PD would probably roll into just an annual. This is what we're gonna do every year, and where with fire, since they're not going to be every year. We'd roll those into like, we budget for them every year, even though we didn't purchase them every year.
Yeah, the only thing, like you said on the front end, you gotta worry about with us is like the 2011 truck company. It's good till 2031, right? But you ought to start looking at ordering it for 3 years at 2028. If that makes sense.
3 years
Mhm.
prior.
Because you have to factor in that build time.
Right.
Because they won't start building it until they have their assigned PO or an agreement that you're gonna move forward with.
That's about a year build time, right?
Well, no, that's 3 years from start to finish right now is what wait time is.
How do we make this policy? Because, it's a concern of mine that I don't think we're allowed to spend money for future boards. So. I mean, I can understand how we can establish a savings in our line. To obligate a savings portion, but with the police for fire, but with police being just an annual expense, I mean, can we have an ordinance that says we're gonna buy a minimum of 20 vehicles per year? And that obligates future, I mean, I know they can always nullify it, but like, how do you legislate this?
Yeah, I don't know. if-
You're a lawyer.
A lawyer.
That's, you're not our lawyer.
I mean, even if you were to legislate, right, if you have some serious economic downturn and you have, you're gonna have adjustments you make, so. Internally, we can have an administrative policy that says this is our fleet replacement policy. But unless we have the funding as the mechanism to support that policy, and that's where I think every year, if we have a policy that's established, that the funding is the key piece of it. It's not.
It's like a guide, we're just establishing
It's,
a
yeah, I don't think
guideline.
it's whether we think.
And
5
then we
years.
may or may not.
It's kind of like, when it comes to the green space recommendation that would set aside like 1% for green space, and then that can
Just
just
nix
be nixed at any time. I mean, it could
That's
be a
right.
recommendation. They're not obligated at budget time to do that, so.
And you certainly could do an ordinance where you say, hey, every year by ordinance, we're gonna. Part of our budget, but, if that's tied to. That's tied to your annual operating budget or your sales tax, that does fluctuate, you can set it as an amount, you can set it as number of vehicles. Or we can just come forward every year and say, hey, this is the policy that we recognize, and this is the amount of money we'll need, and we'll just continue the policy, budget, and set it aside. But right now, we kind of don't really have a starting.
Or we could say, we adopted this as our current schedule, and every however many years, I don't know, that schedule would be reevaluated, and that would be the guideline that the budget should be based upon.
It should be reevaluated at the budget every year, so on an annual
Annually.
basis, it should be.
But the schedule itself evaluated annually, and then not the financial obligation,
Yeah,
but the schedule.
I would think we
Okay.
evaluate the schedule to see if we're like, and if we add vehicles, so 20 vehicles isn't always gonna be the number. 15 years down the road, it may be 25,
Mhm.
60 vehicles.
And it's time to go, but this is basic planning that the city has lacked in the past. That I just want to make sure that we don't fall off the wagon, so to speak, and that we do this and have a schedule and are forward thinking about our needs moving forward, no matter who's on, that it should come up and be a discussion.
Okay.
So, do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, this is
Right.
so. I don't wanna make anybody feel like I'm talking about past people negatively, but this is actually really basic planning. To have a schedule to replace large assets and large quantities of assets, it's almost embarrassing that we haven't had it before. So I'm gonna make sure we have it forever moving forward. So how do we accomplish that at least? With,
I think we could propose,
yeah,
we can propose sort of legislation that says on an
Let's do
annual
it.
basis, we'll incorporate it as part of the budget process.
let's do it.
All right, any further discussion? This doesn't require an action on our behalf, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion from Alderman Goodman, second from Collins, all in favor? Aye. I assume that's.